thought it might be useful before we get too much further into my chapter, Inventing an Abundance-Based Global Currency, from the 2014 edition of Home Planet Defense, that I would introduce you to an audio file from the year 2000 at the third annual Mars Society conference in Toronto. I gave a talk on there on the basic topic that the chapter is about, but within the context of Mars exploration. And I'll drop some links to some other books from the Mars Society founder, Robert Zubrin, on entering space and the case for Mars, and also the book in which the outline of this talk that I gave there is a one page in the compendium or the conference summary. And because it's, I since that time I received 2 graduate degrees and have done written 2 books, but this one page actually summarizes in a very cogent form more than anything else I've written. So I thought it would be useful. So I'll take a picture as clear as possible of that page in that book, give a link to it again, and for you to peruse for yourself. And then also listen to the audio version of me speaking in 2000 and compare it to how I'm talking today, and just to give you some context for that. I'm not just coming out of nowhere, that I've been thinking about this stuff at least since 2000. That was probably my best talk on this topic, but I gave other talks at Unitarian churches, coffee shops, going back to 1996, and the origins of this idea actually goes back, my take on the origins of the idea go back to 1993. In 1993, I was an intern at the Federal Trust for Education and Research in London, which was a think tank, a British think tank that looked at European issues. So when the formation of the euro was being formed, it wasn't even called the euro, it was called the European Currency Unit at the time. I helped put on some of the conferences in London where Europeans came to talk about this issue. England never adopted the European Currency Unit or the euro, but that is the origin in which I started thinking about not necessarily a global currency, but currency and money itself as a foundation for human civilization.
Yes. I have a few prepared remarks, and then I have an outline which you guys have. Hopefully it's passed out to you, and that's for you to take home. I encourage you. My contact information is on that. And then I'll fly through that outline portion, and then hopefully we can have some question and answer, a dialogue session. My background is in history and political science, but essentially I'm a philosopher of economics, and really a radical one. And what you'll hear today is an economic philosophy that really is in what I feel is in the middle of the road, or the middle ground that we're seeking between this UN rights of man property concept and this risk equals royalty concept of property. The speaker before last talked about the tepid nature, the cautious nature of venture capitalists. And there was a maverick economist from Wisconsin, the turn of the century, last century, Thorstein Veblen, and he was also against socialism and capitalism like I am, but he didn't provide anything new to replace it with. I do. But what he said about capitalists were that they have the captains of industry, the elite, just like the elite Politburo, the elite of socialist leaders, have the frame of mind of a toad. I just thought I'd throw that out there. The other quote I'd like to start out with before I have my own quote prepared is one from Thomas Jefferson, from an inscription on the inside of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. He said, "I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change. With the change in circumstances, institutions must advance, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still a coat which fitted him when a boy, as civilized society, to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors. And also, in the plenary session this morning, I thought I want to echo a sentiment. I'm going to shut the door. The first speaker, who was from NASA JFC, who was talking about the Allen Hills meteorite debate, said the best scientific papers can be wrong, and but those wrong papers can provoke thought. And I'm not saying what I'm going to say here, this radical, what I'm going to rattle you with, and then I will, roll with the questions to try to communicate to you better, because you will not get it at first. No one really does. It's when you ask questions and I respond to it that you'll get this. He says that the scientific process is what is important, and the philosophy of economics works the same way. Okay, how does it tie into Mars? Dr. Robert Zubrin, I feel, has opened up a door, and I'm going to try to walk through it. And he basically says that one of the main purposes for colonizing Mars is for humans to explore alternative social structures, even if they fail. He observes that the de facto global civilization, the United West, which is what he calls it, is now faced with the ultimate challenge to explore without being driven by an external stress, an enemy. After reaching a level of comfort and security, of course, the Egyptian and Roman empires did not rise to this challenge, and they fell into ruin. The economic philosophy outlined here is based on internal motivation, which is native to free enterprise and alien to capitalism and, of course, socialism. So I'm making a distinction between free enterprise and capitalism. Budget constraints, a symptom of the now inadequate tools of capitalism and socialism, whatever versions we have of them, mixtures, have hindered the exploration of Mars and the spirit of free enterprise itself. Martian colonization promises the ultimate economic goal, in my opinion, is for every human to be truly needed and appreciated for their service. And that would be the pay, that would be the currency. Our two planets. So that hopefully explains the subtitle, to free enterprise, the verb, to free enterprise from capitalism for civilizations on Mars and Earth, on both. The ultimate goal here, I feel, is an interplanetary government at some point. And the gentleman here, Jonathan Smith, in the earlier session, talked about the relationship between Greece and Mars, and the idea of maybe this could be a demonstration site. And that was my take on his analysis of Greece. It could be a demonstration site for a interplanetary government, a solar system government, because our Constitution was based on, in this country, in the country that I come from, which is South, in America, the first time up here. In America, that Constitution was, we looked to the Greeks and the other systems, and we tried to improve on it. Same thing. So what is the economic situation on Earth today? We have a growing condemnation of multinational corporations who exercise global capitalism. You see this in Seattle, Washington, Washington, D.C., and Davos, Switzerland. It's a worldwide phenomenon. People are fed up, have legitimate gripes, led by the environmentalists and the labor unions, organized labor, against the undemocratic World Trade Organization. And words are important. That's what it is. World Trade Organization, capitalism. And it is undemocratic, just like the the Security Council on the UN. It's undemocratic. It's undeniable. That's a fact. And that's really essentially why they're against. There's no accountability. Still no answer they provide. Outdated assumptions. What are the outdated assumptions that drive this economic situation that we're experiencing now? You have to look back to the Industrial Revolution, and people wanted, for the first time, really, everybody could have, the masses could have a higher, acceptable standard of living, and they deserve that. Unfortunately, with that Industrial Revolution of the past 150 years, has come, there's been environmental degradation and the exploitation of workers' rights. That has always been there, and there's been antitrust laws and tweakings of the system, but that's the stress. That doesn't have to be. How are capitalism and socialism the same? Again, capitalism makes the assumption that people are primarily motivated by greed and are otherwise lazy. And so that external motivation, what Dr. Zubrin wants to get away from, is required by capitalism. The carrot and the stick. The capitalism is a carrot. It's required with capitalism. Socialism makes the equally wrong assumption that only the state knows what is best for people, and that submission to that state is required through external motivation, force, a stick. We need something internally driven, our own internal combustion engine, not the donkey cart economy of the carrot and the stick of capitalism and socialism. We can choose between alternative philosophies of economics. Humans are really the only animal, maybe there's an exception, that can choose our own way of our own social structures. All the other animals, wolves, it's innate. We can change it. And money, as we all know, does rule the world. It's a fact of life. Everybody makes that assumption. So we can keep exchanging time for money and money for things. That's the external reward structure, the status quo. Or we can discard money and barter exchange things for things. And I'm against barter. I want to drive that home. I'm not for barter. That's also an exchange, an external exchange concept. And the option, it's still susceptible to a win-lose, people chipping each other over some barter. That's still possible. And quite frankly, to give capitalism credit, it is more efficient than barter. And there was a reason it evolved. So what's the best of both worlds, of all worlds, is to discard money, but to schedule. And this is where I need to do a better job, and when you ask me questions, I do a better job of illustrating it, to paint the picture. To discard money and scheduling is important. An interchange, the root internal, not exchange, an interchange of production, distribution, and consumption, which is the definition of economics, any economic system. So this is not anti-economics. It is an economic system based on internal motivation. And if you can still produce, distribute, and consume goods and services. And maybe borrowing from Marx, his structure, but really changing it dramatically with a few words. Try this on for size and see if you get a feel for what I'm talking about. From each, he of course, Marx in the Communist Manifesto said, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. I add, from each according to his or her interest and ability, to each according to his or her desire and need, and by inference, need. And that's the internal reward structure. So my recommendation in closing really is that when the mass colonization of Mars occurs, and it will, those who oppose the external exchange reward structures of capitalism and socialism, or any mixture of it, on Earth, retire from Earth. And that's the concept that I like to use, because what do retirees do now that they're able to retire? They're the volunteers in society. They volunteer. 1,000 points of light, volunteerism. Especially, I get a feel that I'm not a real expert on Canada or the other countries, but in America we have this concept of volunteerism. It's noble, and we can do that. So we can volunteer a volunteer type economy on Mars. So this Martian experiment, or a Martian experiment, along with all these other experiments with polis type city-state colonies, at first, to start it out, this Martian experiment would prove or disprove the efficacy of this economic philosophy. And that gets back to the JFC fellow talking about whether there's life in that meteorite or not. I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced myself that this would really work. But I want to create a dialogue, because obviously what we are experiencing now, the protests against the World Trade Organization, we aren't satisfied. There is a lot of dissatisfaction. And my attempt here is to provide a medium, a common ground, a common enterprise, a grander purpose that can motivate people, and so that people can be all volunteers, and we can just forget about money and just go to Mars and just do anything. Create and on Earth, take the same economic concept, if it works out there on Mars in an incubator, bring it back here and have high-speed rail, have sky cars, we should have this now anyway. We should have, but it's expensive. See, there shouldn't be any accidents really, because we should have magnetic roads, laser guided brakes systems. There's enough ingenuity, but there's never enough financing to cars can run on water, hydrogen off of water, but that's a threat to the oil industry. So you have all these entrenched interests. But see, you say, okay, well that's what's going to stop it, the power hungry system. But no, you see, if you get back to Buckminster Fuller's concept, you can, okay. If you get back to Buckminster Fuller's concept, you can, the richest among us can have a higher standard of living with his global electric grid system, where you have renewable energy sources powered along the Bering Straits. The whole continents are linked. You have energy abundance from a naturally occurring source, energy income of the universe. He wanted to exchange the kilowatt hour as the common medium of exchange, and that's what led me into thinking about all this. And I said, well, everybody would have all this abundance, and you'd have all this inflation, but people would have all this abundance, so prices would be high, but everybody could pay for it. So just get rid of money, and let's just do things. And what would keep quality? What would keep quality? The quality would be kept because people, and this might be an external reward. You might say this is an external reward, but I think that it's a symbiotic relationship. People want to be appreciated by their peers. Okay, people are loafing, lazy. They'll be ostracized by the rest of society in this system where there would be no status of the money. If there were status, it would be how much did you achieve. So I'll try to answer the questions. I know I've rattled you. I like to answer the questions, but basically the action plan is for you to engage in dinner table conversation to provoke thought on this philosophy. And this will seem a little paradoxical, I know, but to send $6 along with the name and address payable to me, and that covers. I'm a victim too, under this scheme, and that covers my printing and shipping. And if I can give this talk to anyone else, you have my email right there. Yeah. Question.
One question. Assuming you have mass population of Mars,
Right.
I assume that would either be done by a governmental system or by some other, or by private individuals who make money through the planet. How do you plan then to free from the current capitalistic system to this new economic system if the people that are ultimately decided to go there have control and are bound by that?
Mars is a clean slate right now, and no one has control over it. And so the answer to the question is what Dr. Zubrin says is that we need to. Mars is a great experimental lab to change what we are not satisfied with on this planet, potentially for both planets or for the whole solar system civilization once we colonize the other moons of the other planets. So, but basically, the power of persuasion by talking to as many people as possible, and that's why I gave you all that. And if people want to try it, I'm not saying let's have a revolution and overthrow the World Trade Organization or overthrow the UN and get a democratic form of government for the planet. It would be nice, but what I'm saying is, at least for this audience, let's try it on Mars on a small scale, and see if people are actually, and we know that people would actually produce and be more productive. Did that answer your question, or? Okay. You. Yeah, not ownership, but privacy of possession. So you would have, there would be no communalism, but it would be a privacy of possession. And so you'd have the idea, maybe not on the Mars colonies, you wouldn't have abundance, but if it worked as far as production, if it were on an interplanetary system, there would be a material abundance. And so since there would be a material abundance, for the example I like to use is that you could drive a car or 5 cars for a month or two and then recycle it along with the questionnaire to the engineers who like to redesign things anyway, and then you'd have competition amongst the engineers for market share, and that would be what would be the incentive, pride, to gain that market share. Like it's a smorgasbord type concept, a chili cook-off type concept, really. It would be nice, but we live underneath this system, so it's hard to, unless you really change the whole system, it's hard to to prove anything with any experiment. I mean, it's an issue now.
Does it have to be 100% of your time, or can it be 10%?
Oh, no, what you're saying, no. The volunteerism would be as much or as little as you wanted to. And so what I would see is people might, and this is where the scheduling and the phasing in would have to be really thought through. And I haven't thought through that because I don't want to be a dictator, manifesto type person. I want to spark discussion. But you need to phase it in, maybe different hemispheres or different continents at a time. Because some people, and I think they should be allowed to just travel and get it out of their system, party for a while, for a year or two. And then my understanding of human nature is that people will become bored of that and they'll want to be appreciated for some type of service that they give. And then that's where the products will come. And then I just want to make sure I answer your question of ownership. You would have ownership, but you become like a movie seat. Like you go into a movie seat and it's not crowded. You can sit anywhere. No one's going to really care that you've taken their seat because there's nobody's seats. But there's so many seats that it doesn't matter. So there's no power grabbing. That's the best that I can answer that question. Do we have time for one more? Okay. We got 10 minutes for questions. Okay.
I share with you your vision of this new slate and a new time to have a go at a new social structure. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think the concept you've come up with for this internal motivation is fantastic. I haven't quite understood, however, what it is that you see as the internal motivation. I mean, I see the internal motivation that you described to start with of getting to Mars. What's the internal motivation of the people that live on Mars? Is it for further exploration or further understanding of the universe, or what do you see? How does it go from there? If you see what I mean.
Well, really, that means because we have goals after that. Dr. Zubrin also, he's a historian really by nature, I think, and he understands that now we've just come to the point where we're a global type 1 civilization. He borrowed from some book. A type 2 would be that we master, or that I came up with this concept, and I missed the religious theologian, but I came up with the term of exercising stewardship over our solar system. And then once we do that, then we can reach for the stars and we become either intergalactic or interstellar, eventually intergalactic. So that's where, you mean as far as having goals? Or, yeah. So the goals will be external, but the drive to achieve those external goals, not rewards, paybacks, but goals would come from the inside because we want
to explore, and that's the internal motivation.
Yeah, I don't think I need to prove that. Do I? Okay. Okay.
My question is this: how do we motivate people to volunteer to do jobs that are considered
right? Right. I got you. Glad you asked that. I thought that on the way up here, I knew I left. The reason I don't do these PowerPoint presentations, for one, is that I'm always thinking of new things to add to it. So I'm always scribbling things in the end to get it in there. So I was coming up to Toronto, and I saw construction workers, a lot of traffic during the summer. And I said, okay, in the booklet, I've covered this. Basically, first of all, you have to look at automation, the potential of automation and ingenuity. I hate to hesitate to say American ingenuity, but ingenuity, human ingenuity. That would account for a lot of like bedpan type jobs. We should have floors that suck dirt down. There's a lot of things that we haven't thought of, probably because they're too expensive to develop, and they threaten union jobs. And the union, because it's a zero-sum game, really. It's a hierarchy based. It's a competitive or it's a cutthroat competitive system. They have to stand up for themselves, and so they do stop innovation, like cars that run on hydrogen or civil aviation back in the 50s. They stopped that that research, that R&D funding from Congress to the civil aviation community because it would take away from jobs. Does that answer your question? But basically, but automation, and then also those type of, in the absence of money, the status, those type of jobs that would be menial would be could be done on a short-term basis. See, it would be honorable because it would be hard to do. So people would want to do it out of a volunteer effort. And it wouldn't be like your whole life career is digging ditches. That might be something that you do as a teenager or in between jobs to stay productive while you think about what you want to do in a vocation. Or criminals. Or we should make our criminal population productive. Yeah. Well, this whole Mars thing is actually a step down from my radical statements a few years ago that never seemed to go anywhere. I tried to just change the whole system. We can give these talks and only 3 people come and have all these coffee house talks, and it just didn't snowball, probably because it was a little bit too radical. But I don't know. I think that this is an opportunity, given what Dr. Zubrin is saying, of trying new things, even if just to try them, with the understanding that they might fail, and on these little Polish city-state type initial colonies on Mars. So I don't think it would be that radical. And also, the American Revolution was a radical in one generation. We, abolished the rule of monarchies in that part of the continent. Yep.
I can envision what you're talking about here, human centered design and policies as well. Small city states that are self-contained and static that can grow and share production, maybe amongst the community, obviously. What I have a problem with in the system is grand enterprise. Something like this gentleman was talking about, reaching for the stars. Assume we've got Mars all set up, we've got small city states there, and next step, going interstellar. Something like that requires a huge amount of capital. It's not just time, but it requires resources and resource management and capital. Where would that come from?
Okay, you're making an assumption about the future, and this is, I think, the fault. If I have one fault of science fiction, I hate to do this because I haven't read a lot of science fiction, but I was told because of this flag to read red Mars, green Mars, blue Mars. So I went to the bookstore and I thumbed through it. And I think that if there's one criticism of science fiction is that it's like bad history. It takes current, present day assumptions and it attributes it to another time. And I think you can do that with the studies of the future also. So I think there's a I guess if you call it a fallacy to say, well, colonizing the stars will require all this capital. If we try this system on Mars and it works, then we would extrapolate it to the intergovernmental system, and everybody would be internally motivated. There would be no money. Everybody would be productive. Everybody would be happy. There would still be hardship because there would be accidents in space. The more you travel, that's going to happen. There would be hardships. But that's what builds culture and character. So I think that is an assumption that you can't make about the future, that this system could work if it's proven on a small scale. Yeah. Yeah, look, that's what happened with I think one model that is useful is Franklin Roosevelt's his whole alphabet soup of the New Deal. It was boondoggling, but it did, there was goals and the whole country mobilized. And there was a war going on, but that's what we need. We need this type of war mobilization, but without this external threat. And that's what Dr. Zubrin is talking about, that we need to not be driven by an external threat. And now I think, I will say this, I think a healthy external fear would be the asteroid and comet threat. And I think that would drive Mars quicker. And I'm sorry that the one speaker here had that same thesis, couldn't make it. And I know Dr. Zubrin differs with that viewpoint, that that will come, that asteroid and comet defense will come about once we start colonizing Mars. So I just take the opposite viewpoint. So I think that's a healthy fear that we need of asteroids and comets, and that could mobilize everybody, because we need that in the southern hemispheres, which is poor. We need that inner, cooperation between the hemispheres. So that would be the one external threat that would be, I think, still internal, because it would make use of everybody's talents. Youth in particular, because we don't, that's the whole Social Security debate. People my age don't really feel Social Security, or that we will be able to retire. We aren't confident in that. We really don't know. Yeah. Is that it? Okay.
Thank you very much.